We've come to the final session of the day, a very important topic for Romania, improving energy security in uncertain times. We have 5 speakers for this panel. First of all, I would like to introduce the Minister of Energy, Government of Romania, Sebastian-Ioan Burduja. Welcome. Very nice to see you again. Please take a seat. Matthew Bryza, former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs. Welcome. Giles Dickson, Chief Executive of WindEurope. Welcome. Alessio Menegazzo, Chief Executive and Country Manager of PPC Romania. Welcome. And Cosmin Ghiță, Chief Executive of Nuclear Electrica. Welcome.
Thank you.
Have a seat.
Yeah. How do you do? Yes. Yeah.
And maybe if we can change the water and glasses, thank you, for everyone. Okay, so you're going to take us to lunch in talking about energy. We need some fuel. So I'm going to hand straight over to the Minister to tell us what's been happening on the energy front and what is in prospect.
First of all, thank you for having us, and thank you to the economists for hosting this event, and thank you to the fellow panelists. It's the worst thing to be, between a speech and a lunch, so I'll be very brief. I think that there are many good things happening in our energy sector. Even today, I noticed that we had a very diverse mix this morning. The wind helped us. Thank you very much. And we managed to be a net exporter. That said, there's a lot of investment plans, and we already see some of them coming to fruition. So I'll try to be, again, very brief. On green energy production, we have around 10,000 megawatts in the pipeline. We have a very successful call under the Recovery and Resilience Plan, with 460 million euro budget. Our target was 950 megawatts. Over 500 megawatts already done. They're connected to the grid with, still a while to go till the end of the RRF, middle of next year. So we expect to reach around 1,300, maybe 1,400 megawatts by the end of the RRF. Last year, we did the first auction for CFD, for solar and wind. We had 1,000 megawatts for wind, 500 for solar, and it was very successful. We managed to reach an average price that was 20-25% lower than the maximum price set. And this year, we're doing a second round for 3,500 megawatts. Right now we're thinking 2,000 wind, 1,500 solar. So again, projects that will come online in the next few years, very attractive, 15 years guaranteed price, so on and so forth. We have the Modernization Fund, which is a huge advantage for Romania, around 14 billion euro total. And there we are implementing solar parks for public institutions. We have over 700 contracts signed, and a total of 1,400 contracts will be signed this year. Probably around 300-400 megawatts just there. Plus, production and self-consumption for large businesses, another 850 million euros. Plus the projects we have with the Oltenia energy complex that is transitioning away from coal into green energy. So 10,000 megawatts solar and wind, about 2,200 megawatts for nuclear. Mr. Ghiță will explain more on that, but I think we're very much on track. We have 3,500 megawatts for gas, and those projects are going relatively well, some of them very well, like the Mintia project, which is very large, 1,750 megawatts, the largest gas plant in Europe it will be, and that will be done next year, maybe part of it this year as well. And a lot of activity in storage. So we started last year with like 20 something, 16 megawatts of storage and batteries. We ended the year with around 130. We think we can exceed 500 by the end of this year and double that next year. And I guess an important announcement is that this summer we'll launch a call for standalone batteries, 150 million euro grants from the Modernization Fund. And we hope to sign those contracts by the end of the year. So all in all, I think we'll have a lot more energy, and our vision is to turn Romania into a net exporter of energy for the region, and not just of energy, but also of security. I think that is absolutely critical. And so our goal now, because last year we managed after 17 years to pass a new energy strategy, our goal now is to implement. So execute, 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 and invest, invest, invest.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed for setting out all that. So now over to our next speaker, which is Matthew Bryza. Welcome again.
Thanks. Really happy to be here, Nectaria, and your fantastic team. Thank you again for a beautiful conference that's really stretching my mind. And thanks for a chance to offer some good news, then some bad news, and then I'll end up on some good news. The first good news you just heard from the minister, and it's a remarkable construction plan for renewable energy, which everyone, I'm sure, in this room, although maybe not in Washington, D.C., agrees is really necessary, and I will come to that. But sticking with more good news, I read through one more time the excellent description of this panel discussion, and it encompasses a lot of good news. So briefly, what it says, since 2022, the European Union has shifted away from Russian energy and is increasingly looking to fill gaps with green and renewable energy. How should governments, including those in Southeast Europe, collaborate to help ensure Europe's energy security? What about accelerating the green energy transition, keeping energy costs affordable, and how did COP29 go? Okay, so the good news is there's great consensus, certainly in the European Union, on the need for the energy transition to happen. It's happening. The consensus, of course, has been implemented to reduce dependence on Russian gas, and that's the issue that brought me to this part of the world 25 years ago, and how I got to meet Prime Minister Stanishev, how I was trying to persuade folks not to do the South Stream pipeline, but in any case, now you have the Turk Stream pipeline, which is providing reliable supplies of natural gas, though the molecules are Russian. But that's bad news. So the good news is the European Union has pivoted dramatically since February of 2022 when Russia the second time invaded Ukraine. Germany in particular did things no one could have imagined they would do, which was they were able to deploy LNG import terminals in record time, and the dependence on Russian pipe gas has dropped dramatically. Still some dependence on Russian liquid natural gas, but still it's going way down. Good for American importers, of course. A lot of the liquid natural gas coming in is from the United States. And natural gas, it's a transition fuel, right? It burns only half as dirty or twice as clean as coal. So the more natural gas that's been burned rather than coal, the cleaner the environment has gotten and fewer greenhouse gases, though it's still a fossil fuel. So let's talk about renewables. Renewables this year, according to S&P, this year, for the first time, overall global investment in renewable sources of power will exceed fossil fuels. Fantastic news. And in terms of new generation capacity, the minister will correct me if I'm wrong, but now today, if you compare just the operating costs of existing coal-fired plants, just the operating costs are higher than new build and operation of solar and wind plants. So economics then are going to drive the energy transition, even if the political consensus is unwinding a bit in the United States, and I would argue in a moment, maybe beyond the United States as well. And then COP29. COP29 was billed by many as a failure. I'm a former ambassador to Azerbaijan, so you may think I'm biased, but in this case, I could be very critical too, because I know the country very well. But when it comes to COP29, there were all sorts of op-eds and other condemnations of it as a failure. And there was one NGO said it was such a failure because COP29 was supposed to increase the pledges of the developed countries to the lesser developed countries to manage the consequences of climate change. The goal had been going in, get to 300 billion annually and get to I think it's 1.3 trillion by 2035. So lamentations that COP29 was a failure, except that those two goals were met. The developed countries participating in COP29 agreed at the 11th hour to those targets. So good news story. Renewables are gaining momentum, they make commercial sense, and the developing world is realizing, my God, we've got to do something to help lesser developed countries. Bad news. The bad news is that since COVID, if you look at the S&P's index for green energy, all the gains, there were massive gains in 2020 and 2021 as the world woke up to the need to take care of the world during COVID. And those gains have all been erased in the last couple of years. So the index is back where it was in 2020, meaning that renewable energy companies aren't as profitable as they used to be, or they're not as profitable as you'd think they should be when you've got this, as I said before, record investment. And as the minister said, record investment in renewable energy. What's going on? Well, more bad news, I think, is it's Washington or the United States overall. Everything we talk about here about, the vertical corridor, which used to have such strong U.S. support, or working together, the U.S. with its European allies to foster, with the private sector, a network of oil and gas pipelines from the Caspian Sea into Europe. That kind of strategic vision and a sense of shared ideals is absolutely gone now in Washington. I run a consultancy. It's a Houston-based consultancy, but in this part of the world, in Istanbul. We're really plugged in to the Trump administration, for better or for worse. And the things I hear about what I just said, working together with the European allies, fostering the energy transition, are amazing and negative. So there's a big push now, of course, from President Putin to lift U.S. sanctions on Russian energy. And guaranteed, when the U.S. starts lifting those sanctions, which we may hear about later today after I think President Trump agrees that Crimea is going to remain under Russian control, once those sanctions against Russian oil and gas imports by the United States, production go away, I think we're going to see a lot more oil and gas imports coming back into the European Union. As I forgot who it was earlier today was saying that the European, especially the German economy, really needs the cheap energy resources to be able to compete and increasingly compete with the United States. So that's bad news. The other bad news, the last piece of bad news is during a trip I did to Brussels last week, I was astounded by how deep and quick the transition has been away from looking at the United States as partner and protector, now as threat and foe. I saw that I was doing discussions on critical raw materials, and the big push was, yes, we've got to onshore critical raw material supplies, make sure that we're not dependent on China and the United States. And on the defense side as well. It was friends of mine that Eastern European, closest friends you could imagine of the United States on the need to counter Russia, are absolutely furious and disappointed with the United States. And I don't see how the trust is going to come back if we had the Trump administration initially calling into, and I'm not a member of any political party, by the way, but the Trump administration initially calling into question whether NATO was obsolete. Then we had the Biden administration saying, oh God, NATO is so important, we've got to strengthen it, and it worked, to now, where we had J.D. Vance, the vice president's speech, saying the threat to Europe is within, including here, as you all recall, and it's not Russia and it's not China. And then we had the debacle, the monstrosity of the attack on President Zelensky by Vice President Vance and President Trump. So that has really shaken the U.S.'s European allies into thinking, you elected him once, okay, we got back on track. You elected him a second time, and now he is essentially dissembling or taking apart the transatlantic community, along with which goes all the collaboration there used to be, really with the U.S. playing a leadership role in helping Europe and encouraging Europe to diversify its energy supplies away from Russia. Okay, finally to close, the good news. Europe doesn't need the United States to lead on this stuff. Europe has done a great job, as I said in the beginning, in already diversifying its supplies of natural gas. With leadership like we just heard, there's massive investment in the renewable sector. It's the European consensus to move forward, and you will. You will without the United States. But I hope you'll lead by example, and over time, when the transactional Trump administration is looking for foreign policy based on what the U.S. can extract from other countries and what sort of investment deals can happen that benefit American companies, because that's what I hear when I'm promoting some project with the Trump administration. They say, you need to show me which American companies will make what amount of money from such a project. As these projects succeed, because they make economic sense, then maybe things will turn around in Washington because we're following what makes sense for the planet, but also for the economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Over to Giles Dickson, and I understand you have to leave by 3, is that right?
Look, I'll be flexible. I'll stay. This is going to be a great discussion.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you. So, go ahead.
Do you have a specific question for me, Joan, or?
I can ask you questions straight away if you want, or do you want
No, I'll talk.
talk? I'll talk a little bit and then I'll ask questions.
Okay. Matthew, you very helpfully reminded us of the exam question for this session, and you read it out from your phone. You said it was excellent. It is excellent, but there's one word in it that perhaps is misleading. I'm going to read just one section of it. How can we accelerate the green transition, while reducing energy costs? It's that word while, which sort of implies that accelerating the green transition might in fact increase energy costs. I'm going to challenge that word while. I'm going to give you 2 facts. If you take all of the new wind and new solar that was built in the EU in 2021, 2 and 3, over those 3 years, the net impact of the capacity additions just in 3 years was European electricity consumers saved 100 billion euros. Average wholesale electricity prices in the EU were 8% lower than they would otherwise have been. Now you might be thinking, oh, he's the wind lobbyist. He would say that. It's their own figures. Those figures come from the International Energy Agency. I will share another fact with you. We have a problem in the wind energy industry. Every day we have somebody from steel, cement, chemicals, aluminium banging on our door or on the phone saying, please, please build more wind farms. We want to decarbonize, we want to electrify, and we know that wind is cheaper than electrifying with fossil power, but you're not building enough wind farms quickly enough. And the fact is we are not. We need to be building twice as many new wind farms in Europe as we are today. And you see these energy intensives, they see that wind is cheap. They cannot get enough of it. Sadly, we're not building enough, but Sebastian, you're doing a great job here. You've been very modest. Your CFD auction was a model to every other country in Europe that you ran at the end of last year, and it's fantastic that you're repeating it this year with even bigger volumes for wind. We are delighted with it. You've given the core figures. People weren't even bidding at the price ceiling. They were bidding below. You got really good developers with good European turbines bidding in to your auction. Fantastic. 5 years ago, one might have come to Bucharest and talked about wind energy, and it might have been perceived as a largely Western European thing. That is no longer the case, thanks in large part to your leadership. It's not only Romania, Poland is building offshore and onshore wind, so are the 3 Baltic states. Slovakia is about to start building their first wind farms. Serbia, North Macedonia, Montenegro, countries throughout the region are investing in wind because they can see it makes sense. And Moldova, indeed, yes, about to run their first auction, running it, in fact, as we speak. Thank you, Sebastian. You didn't want me to speak too long, Joan, so
No.
I'll close it there for the time being, yeah?
Perfect. Okay, that's great. We are going to have good discussion. So Alessio Menegazzo from PPC Romania, you're next. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm wondering what I'm gonna say after Giles, because he left me without any kind of, I have to invent something. No, I'm joking. So I will not pledge for the fact that investing in renewables is the way to make energy cheap. And by making energy cheap, you can address the problem of competitiveness of Europe. Okay, this is for me a known fact. There is no point in discussing anymore that renewables are increasing the cost of energy. Renewables are the way to drop prices down. That's a fact. Established scientifically, business. Thank you. So, I think that what is somehow missing in the discussion, or something that I would like to address, is that the energy transition is something that puts a new factor in the scheme. While energy policies were mostly state-driven until 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the biggest upside of the energy transition is that it puts the customer with a relevant role, and it gives also a, let's say, bottom-up approach in the energy sector. What do I mean with this? Well, in Romania, we have a practical example. Nobody expected that we are going to have 200,000 prosumers in 2.5 years, like producing like a nuclear reactor. Which is something that is absolutely amazing. It means that consumer customers are grabbing the opportunity, and the opportunity is to be more efficient, because at the end of the day, this is what the energy transition entails. How can we be more efficient? Okay. The problem is that such big number of prosumers in such short time created a lot of criticalities in the system, in the networks, to us as utility, but also to our friend Cosmina Nuclear Electrica. And this is a fundamental thing that we should understand. So energy is more, and it will become more and more something that is about policies than investments. Because investment will be done by the private sector, by big companies, by investment funds, by utilities, by consumers that will seek efficiency. So there is no point anymore to, let's say, have hard talks or hard policy on investments, because investments will be done in generation. The problem is, what are we going to do with the network that needs to accommodate all this novelty, all these small prosumers? What are we going to do in order to provide a stable network to our customers, household, industrial customers, and again, with the goal of making the use of energy as efficient as possible, because electricity is the most efficient way in which you can use energy. So, because in the last period there was a comparison that I think it's very nice, okay, and it's about highways. So comparing, at the end of the day, the electricity network, which is an infrastructure, with the highways, okay? There is, at least in Romania, there is nobody that is claiming that it's wrong to invest in highways. We spend too much on highways. There is no need to make highways. There was a president many, many years ago that said that Romania doesn't need highways, and he is mocked with this statement. So, but if we speak about energy infrastructure, well, we have all this discussion about what should be the costs, who should do it, how we should do it. And again, customers are investing more and more and more. And if we don't take a stand, and we don't have the support of, let's say, authorities to design policies to make networks adapted, it will be very, very difficult. So it's like everybody is entitled to have a car. But in order to drive a car, you need a driving license. You cannot go at 200 kilometers per hour in the streets or you cannot park on the sidewalks. So there are rules, okay? And this is something that needs to be understood. We need rules, we need policies more than ever. We need policies in Romania, but mostly we need policies from Brussels. Those policies has to be taken and adapted. Okay, every country has a difference, of course, by each European country. And this is something that we need to stress more and more. I don't believe in energy independency for countries. I don't believe in energy sovereignty, because at the end of the day, if we have a European energy market, common European energy market, the customer doesn't care if the electron is produced in Denmark, in Romania, in Brazil, in Portugal, or in any other country. For him, it's important that this electron is cheap. And the way to make it cheap is have policies to develop more networks, to digitalize them, to have a common European electricity market as soon as possible, and the shape of the customer, the benefit for the whole community will be massive.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think it's maybe you, Cosmin, you got to leave by 3 o'clock. So say what you want to say and respond to anything that you've heard. You too. Okay, this is a challenge.
So, Giles and everyone, thank you very much for the breath of hot, fresh air. But I wanted to say that it's a privilege to join this discussion, because it's one of the most pressing issues for Europe today: energy security in uncertain times, and it has been for a very long period of time. Those that have been looking more at southeastern Europe, the Black Sea, know this is a very, very complicated problem. And today I'm probably going to focus a little bit on how southeastern Europe can contribute to Europe's energy security, how we can balance green transition with affordability, and some of the lessons drawn from COP29. As said, yes, maybe it wasn't necessarily the most popular COP, but there were certain conclusions that came out of there. One of which was the signing of the contract for Units 3 and 4 at Cernavodă, which is one of the achievements over a long period of time. And I wanted to thank Minister Burduja and everyone for the support that was issued, specifically because there is no major infrastructure that you can build without government planning and government support. So it's clear. Private industry has its role. We're very nimble developers, great project developers, great engineering, technology incubators, but at the end of the day, you need to have a public-private partnership to make things work. Case in point, there's no renewables that are installed without a CFD structure that are being deployed in an efficient manner. So the more you have a capacity factor in that sense, the higher support and planning you need. Mostly because maybe LCOE is not the best measure for an electron's price. Maybe there's other ways, other things that you need to factor, such as total cost of transmission, and there's discussions about other matrices that are being discussed in the IEA and other fora. But at the end of the day, you need all cooks in the kitchen to make it worthwhile. What I've learned in the energy sector is there's not such a thing that too many cooks. You need all cooks in the kitchen to make it worthwhile. And southeastern Europe is uniquely positioned to enhance Europe's energy security. we can be a bridge between energy suppliers, large energy quantities and volumes, especially if we're thinking about gas, and consumers, a hub for diversified production, and it has a lot of resources that support the energy production and energy transition. Even if we're talking critical minerals, if we're talking wind, gas, or potential for installing nuclear power plants, which at the end of the day have proven to function quite well in this part of the world. Interconnectivity, therefore, and regional cooperation must be strengthened, and strong cross-border infrastructure is a must. If we're to carry electrons into a unified market, you need to have an efficient transmission line. You need to have storage. You need to have high voltage direct current cable and other types of infrastructure to lower the cost of electrons that are being transported. Actually, one of the reasons why small modular reactors are so popular right now is exactly the cost of transmission and distribution being thus high, and people want, and large industrials and data centers that are power hungry, looking at localizing their energy production for reducing infrastructure and energy security, because it's paramount to their business plans. Expanding nuclear and low carbon energy is critical, and while renewable energy is growing, and we're very happy it is also creating a need for a baseload, which we're happy to serve at duty 24/7, as we've done. Units 1 and 2 at Cernavoda have served the duty of the grid tremendously, with Unit 2 being rated #1 in the world in terms of capacity factor and security of operations multiple times in the world. And we're happy to do that and expand our lessons learned with our neighbors in the region. And more importantly, strategic energy partnerships should be reinforced, where I'm very grateful for the fact that we're seeing governments in southeastern Europe working closely with EU institutions, partners abroad, and looking at other larger formats such as the 3Cs initiative that can help broaden these dialogue. A diversified energy mix, in our view, is very key, and additional investments and creating the right schemes for investors are paramount, as well as planning the grids of the future. We were very pleasantly impressed with the model that was implemented by the UK regulator that has actually developed a structure to support the hydrogen and transmission cables and transmission networks for gas of the future. So thinking about how do you adapt regulations and re-regulate nuclear deployment, renewable deployment, battery deployment, payment schemes to support deployment of large infrastructure is very important. So all of these require a very concerted effort. It's major, and we do think that this part of the world can very well support Europe and be a bridge, as we've mentioned. And we look forward to doing our small part in this whole equation as a company. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cosmin. Okay, I know you either end has to rush off in a minute. We'll continue a little bit afterwards, but so I'm going to try and prevail on you to stay a bit longer. But I know you can't. But I just wanted to give you the chance to respond to anything that you heard, and maybe particularly Matthew's points, about some of the, headwinds, maybe that we're facing, geopolitical headwinds. Yeah, over to you.
Well, I often say I'm the luckiest minister in the cabinet, and that's because I work with extremely smart people every day, and I think the panel today shows it, that in energy there are people who see things as they are and come up with facts and with a story of success that we're all trying to develop. Just a few nuances, if you allow. One, I'm all for the green transition, and I will continue to support it with all the financing I can get, with all the arguments I can find, with all the speeches I can make. It should not come at the expense of energy security. And Romania is in a position today where we need, according to the Recovery and Resilience Plan, to our commitment to the EU, to shut down 1,755 megawatts of coal plants on January 1st of next year. We simply do not have anything to replace them with right now. And so this needs to be taken into account. We are negotiating with the Commission on extending a bit this period. And our plan, it's in our strategy too, is quite simple. Move away from coal as fast as we can, replace it with gas for baseload production, and then replace gas with nuclear for the longer term, while also investing in solar, wind, batteries, grids, and of course, all this good stuff. And I strongly believe this needs to be said. Second, the European market is not an integrated market. That's just a fact. If you look at the map every single day, there are wide discrepancies between the prices we pay in Southeast Europe and the prices that Western Europe pays. With very few exceptions, like possibly today, a few days ago, we had a very good wind day. And on those days, we pay energy that's a lot cheaper than in the West. But the point is, there should be an interconnected network where we all benefit from it. And perhaps in the short term, some will pay more in Western and Central Europe, and we will pay a lot less most of the time. But that's what Europe should be about. It's a single market, says the Union for Coal and Steel, Jean Monnet, the founding fathers. Otherwise, it's just, a reality that we have been resigned to accept, that there's no wires crossing the border between Austria and Slovakia, for instance, or that the capacity for interconnection between Austria and Hungary is half of what it could be very easily because there are stations on both sides of the border, but not enough wires crossing it. And so my last point, and I think it's important, I really am a big fan of contributing to the transition with our industry as well. I don't think it's wise to keep importing from China and faraway places all these components and inverters and power generators and transformers and all that stuff. That's why in the Recovery and Resilience Plan, we have financed, I think that for the first time, essentially the production of solar panels and solar panel cells, the production of batteries, and I hope that these projects will come through, and step by step, Europe can really revamp its industry and benefit from it. Otherwise, with European taxpayers' money, we will indeed continue to subsidize the production of other countries. And that's not very wise.
Thank you. It sounds like you're calling for a more pragmatic path forward, which was, I don't know how many of you read that piece, which I thought was very useful in Foreign Affairs, in the latest edition of Foreign Affairs, called The Troubled Energy Transition, which was calling for precisely this by Daniel Yergin and some other. It was actually making the point that it's a misnomer in a way to talk about energy transition. What actually is happening is an energy addition. So we have this incredible rise in renewables as a percentage share from virtually zero, not so many years ago, 15 years ago, or a bit longer maybe, to 15% now of total world electricity production. That was 2024 was a record year. It was also a record year for energy, total energy derived from oil, coal, hydrocarbons. So we're seeing this, very significant rise in renewables, but at the same time, we're seeing a continuation of and that's hardly budged. I mean, the hydrocarbons economy, it was, in 1990, it was about 85%, now it's about 80%, so that shift is not taking place. And I guess the argument was,
In Romania, it has taken place.
Yeah, of course, but
And
this is...
let me just give you a fact. We're the number one country in the EU that reduced greenhouse gas emissions, 77% reduction compared to 1990, 77% compared to 30-something% European average. In the energy sector, over 7,000 megawatts of coal and gas plants completely shut off, never to be started again. So in this context, to continue to pushing, or as we say, to push on the horse that's pulling the hardest is not really fair, because now in peak consumption hours, we are dependent on imports from countries that produce their energy with coal. So what the hell have we solved?
Yes. Well, the implication is that where the transition will take place, it has to be in the global south, and that's where that's where it's going to be costly. And so, yeah, there's something different is happening here. Cosmin, before you go, did you want to add anything to what you've said already, or
Any questions? Well, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise,
He has work to do. He's building 2,200 megawatts.
He's
of
very busy.
plants.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess the Chernobyl was very big, step forward and achievement. So I guess just to ask you what the kind of plans are, just for the immediate period now, for the next few years. That would be good to hear.
Getting to work and building, right? Because what we're doing right now, it requires a lot of effort. And we're seeing a dire need for human resources, supply chains, all of which these projects have the benefit of revamping for our benefit and the larger industrial benefit of Romania. And we're very excited by the production by new production through CANDU, Units 3 and 4, that have proven to be a very good legacy for us. For the deployment of small modular reactors as a possibility to replace some of Romania's oldest coal plant that was shut down 10 years ago. And we're proving very well a case of nuclear renewable integration. We have solar and we have right next door, and we're balancing the grid very well. And we think that's a model that can be exported to probably another 100 and so coal-fired plants in the region that will be coming offline in the next 15 to 20 years. So the opportunity is massive. That's one piece. The other thing is the energy of the future. We are also working on a tritium removal facility that uses Romanian technology. Tritium is the fuel for fusion. So ITER and all other exciting fusion projects that we're talking about, we are trying to service in that sense as a fuel hub, and producing also medical isotopes through our power plants to help treat different types of cancer in Romania and the European Union. So through the work that we're doing, it's pioneering, it's intensive, it's beautiful, and it has an impact not only in the grid, but socially as well. And it's one of the most intellectually rewarding projects that we can be on.
Okay, thank you, Mary. I don't want to keep you longer. I know I have kept you longer, but we can carry on for a few minutes, maybe, if you've got the appetite. Alessia and Matthew and Giles, yeah? Yes. So, please excuse our two speakers. It's been very good of them to stay with us so long, and join me in thanking them. Thanks a lot. Okay, I thought you might want to come back on, a few things now. So, Matthew, did you want to say a few words, or who was just saying they wanted to speak? Giles, was it?
Giles was it.
Giles, yeah.
Yeah, one of the many great things that Sebastian has done as minister is to persuade the European Union, together with Bulgaria and Greece, that they've got to change the algorithm which governs electricity trading and electricity flows from Germany and that Central European bloc. Today, the algorithm works in such a way that not enough importance is attached to electricity consumption east and southeast of Germany. And now that's going to change, and very well done, Romania. Romania is going to have to invest even more money in both the transmission and the distribution networks, but there's one thing that will make that easier, which is both Transelectrica and the distribution system operators today are overwhelmed with applications for grid connections from wind and solar. And I'm afraid that a lot of those applications are from purely speculative projects. Project developers who want to try and get the grid connection permit, and then they'll sell their project, make some money and go away and repeat the process. They have no intention of building the project, these guys. And they're clogging up the system. They used not to exist. these people until we liberalize the electricity markets. Now, the good news is there is nothing in EU law that prevents Romania or any other country from saying to the TSOs and DSOs, guys, stop doing first come, first serve. Stop treating every grid application equally. Be strategic. You know some of them are more serious and more important than others, so process those projects first. And that will make life so much easier for the grid operators, and we'll get the grid connections built in the right places on time.
Okay. Alessio, did you want to respond to that? I mean, you actually put a lot of emphasis in what you were saying at the end, that we need some changes in policies in Romania, but mostly we need it from Brussels. And, we need more networks, digitalization, common EU energy market. Are you confident that that's going to happen in the foreseeable future?
If I'm confident or not, we'll...
Maybe you need the mic.
What I know is that we have a job to do. So, and we are going to do this job no matter what. So, again, Giles is speaking for me also as a distributor operator. He's right. And again, this is a very good point. We see this tendency of government, and I'm speaking about the Romanian government, to be very, very present in the energy sector for investments in generation, which is not the case, because again, those investments will be made no matter what. Okay. So my pledge is to have a switch mentality and understand that the role of the state in the energy sector is very different from the 90s, the 80s. We are living, and we are going to live in a different era. I don't agree, for example, I'm sorry that Minister Burduja left. I don't see a problem in buying PVs from China. We have been lazy in Europe. We delegated to somebody else. And now we cannot say that this is, we need to stop because we were lazy. This is the reality we need to face. And I prefer to have buying PV from what, and of course, I would love to see PV production massive in Europe. But until that point, I will not impede consumers to buy PVs, because any PV is less dependency from gas, not from Russian gas, from gas. Because gas in the energy sector is not efficient. You should use gas where it brings value, not cooking and not heating, because the technology today says that you can do otherwise. So, again, we need to understand, or let's say, the regulator or the government needs to understand that energy now is the topic, is a technical topic, is a economical topic, is a social topic, and it's not anymore about strictly engineering and building generation. It's about making the energy transition possible and cheap and achievable for end consumers in a completely different scenario, with completely new technology, with completely new players. And unfortunately, this is the reality. Most of the time, we are in huge delay with what is happening in the reality on the field. And it is something that it needs to be understood as fast as possible, because otherwise we will not be, as Europe, competitive. And we are going to face the same problem that we are facing today, on and on and on and on again. So again, countries per se do have a different role from 20 years ago when they were owning generation. They shouldn't own generation anymore. They should simplify and help the transition to help in a very, very, slow, in a very swift way, which unfortunately it's not the case yet.
So, I mean, you're saying that in this case, costs, should trump any other kind of geopolitical considerations, the China question. I mean, I happen to agree, not just on, EVs, PVs, what, if it's cheaper and we're not producing.
Yesterday, BID was announcing 500 kilowatt charging station, which will charge 80% of an EV in 5 minutes. So why shouldn't we allow people to buy this product if they want it, of course, okay? Because we were lazy in Europe and we didn't invest in EV, in batteries, in PVs, and we still don't invest in electricity network, because investing in electricity network is the differentiator of making an energy transition or something that looks like something that is similar to an energy transition, but at the end of the day will not.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very clear. We have to finish. I'm going to let you have a quick comeback, but we have to finish because we're at 15:15. So, Giles, did you want to respond?
Yeah, very quick response to what Alessio has had. Yeah, buy the cheapest you can is fine in principle, but when Europe is manufacturing the same equipment, and nearly all of the wind turbines built in Europe today are still made in Europe by Europe's fantastic 5 wind turbine manufacturers, then there has to be a level playing field with Chinese imports.
Okay.
You can't ask European manufacturers to compete with unfairly subsidized imports. And the European Union is right onto this, and they've launched an inquiry under the EU Foreign Subsidies Regulation against Chinese wind turbine manufacturers who they suspect are offering turbines in Europe at unfairly subsidized prices and with unfairly subsidized terms of finance.
Okay, thank you. Matthew?
Yeah, just very quickly wanted to draw out a point I think both of you were making that Cosmin skated over and make sure I understood correctly. So if you look at the overall cost of renewable energy generation, so the levelized cost of energy over the entire lifetime of that investment, you can't beat it economically, renewable energy. But there is that investment that needs to happen in the grid, right? And so there's not investment happening in it as a commercial venture. That's a governmental requirement, I guess. Is there a way to make the grid investments commercially attractive?
Oh, very quickly.
Yes.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And okay, please join me in thanking the panelists. Again, great session, very interesting.
Private capital that wants to